Okay, so I'm just gonna record a quick video because I mentioned last week that I was gonna post a video on chronic illness and living with chronic illness, and it was kind of hijacked by the people with IBS and bowel problems, which I am one. I have IBS, and they all kind of wanted to know a little more about IBS and how to deal with it, how I've coped with it, and so I thought I'd just make that a separate video, rather than clutter up what will probably be quite a long video otherwise. So, just as some background, I have chronic fatigue syndrome, or ME, and with that, like most, comes with bowel dysfunction. I do believe on my diagnosis they call it functional bowel disorder, but the gastroenterologist, and by and large it's IBS. And IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, is just an umbrella term really for a symptom set. It's not an illness in itself. It largely gets diagnosed as an illness, but I feel that maybe in 10-20 years we're going to have less IBS diagnoses and more specific discoveries on what the cause of those symptom sets are. For instance, I know that with chronic fatigue syndrome it's possibly related to low serotonin production in the body, which creates some of the lowness of chronic fatigue syndrome, and can also affect the bowels, which also use serotonin in their whole second brain mechanism. So I'm not the best case as such when it comes to recovering or coping with IBS, because my chronic fatigue syndrome is slowly getting better. As it gets better, so does my IBS get better. I can now eat fruit and vegetables to an extent if it's not citrus fruit. I can eat fibre, again in moderation. I can even tolerate some spicy food now, where before I'd be vomiting, fever, what else a spicy food would be doing. But yeah, so I'm getting better with it, and I also wanted to show you a few of the things that really helped me get control of the IBS even early on when the CFS was still bad. And I've got some here. Well, the first important one for me was picking up a fibre supplement, which was soluble fibre, and I take it in gummy form. I do have the big boy grown up like psyllium husk stuff that you mix up, but it's really awful. It's possibly slightly more expensive to take it in gummy form, but you take 2 of these a day, which I haven't actually taken a dose today. So I'll take 2 of these every morning, and they don't taste too bad. They're not terribly easy to get in the UK, for reasons I'm not quite sure about. So I'm kind of limited to about 2 brands, and only one of them just appears occasionally. But they smell weird, but they don't taste too bad. This cost me maybe, I can't remember. I spent that money, but this is 4 grams per serving, so it's 2 grams per gummy. Taking these in the morning can make quite a bit of difference, because fibre is quite essential. And why did I try to eat something squishy on camera? Sorry. When with IBS and things, the foods that they tell you not to eat are all your sources of fibre. You're told not to eat skins and fruits and vegetables and all these things, and you're left with why won't they stop eating? I'm good. Okay. And they tell you to stop eating the things which are your important sources of fibre. So you get in a situation where you're just not getting a fibre intake, and that in itself is producing some of the problems that you would relate with IBS. And soluble fibre is important because it doesn't usually trigger IBS symptoms, and it brings everything to a middle ground. It's like a neutralizer for sort of base and acids. When you take soluble fibre, if you have diarrhea, then it can normalise that and harden it up. If you have constipation, it can soften it up and help it get moving. So it's kind of a bit of a wonder substance in that respect. The other supplement I use is peppermint oil, and the function of peppermint on the bowels is to it basically relaxes all the valves and sphincters and intestines and such, and helps relieve gas. And gas and bloating is a major feature in IBS pain and dysfunction. When there's any kind of intestinal distension from air, that's when a lot of your IBS symptoms are going to flare. And that's a lot of the problem with. That's why things like sulphurous foods like beans and cabbage, etc., are normally trigger foods. It's because of their gas production. So you get a little capsule like this, and I take one of these of water about an hour or half an hour before the dose says about 3 times a day or 2 or 3 times a day, but I just take one before my largest meal of the day, if I can remember. And taking those has been a massive help. When I started using those, I started getting under and making a lot of major benefits, because it's quite a high dosage of peppermint, and it really just helps all the digestive issues. It also lowers the nausea. And I don't know about other people, but for me, it's quite nausea is a major factor of the IBS, which comes into my second thing, which is my addiction to mints. Anyone who knows me knows I have a massive addiction to mints. And these, I use things like, the Polos aren't the best example, they are more just for my addiction. Things like Tic Tacs, Altoids, Polos in the peppermint form, this is in the UK at least, have real peppermint oil, and you want to look on the ingredients and make sure they have mint essential oil or peppermint oil, and make sure it's real stuff. A lot of them are just mint flavouring. You want to make sure it has real mint oil, because it will provide a similar benefit to the peppermint oil, but even just the act of sucking on it can provide digestinating saliva, and also does just help relieve nausea. Albeit it's possibly not very good for your teeth or anything, but I think any IBS person will kind of just fuck their teeth for the sake of just getting some relief. So those are the main things that I've used to tackle it. Aside from that is the obvious diet control. Avoid triggers, be careful, be mindful, keep a food diary can help, and in the end, when it comes to the actual coping side of it, is to kind of remember that IBS isn't real as such in a lot of cases. And I don't mean that by the symptoms aren't real, or what you're feeling isn't real, but by and large a lot of cases of IBS are just believed to be the nerves overreacting and overstimulating, oversensitive feeling in the gut. So everything going on in the gut is being felt more and causing discomfort. And it gets to a point where when you kind of accept the fact that when you're feeling bloated or you're not feeling well with it, it's just to think, well, these are just normal stomach, normal intestinal processes that I'm just feeling more, and just get on with it, pop a mint and deal with it. And you start to become, and I think anyone with bowel disease at this point, or IBS, has probably started to come to terms with it a little, when they know what sets them off and they think, oh, that's that pain, that's what I've done, and then they just kind of push through it. And it's a hard thing, especially for people. I mean, if anyone out there is freshly diagnosed or just started to get problems with this, I know how it's very difficult, and especially if you're fitness involved. Everything with fitness comes down to food. Well, mostly comes down to food in the end. And IBS and bowel disease obviously directly relates to food, what we can eat, how we eat it, and how we enjoy food. And even things like the more serious cases like Crohn's and colitis, the medications for those like prednisone and all the corticosteroids and things like that, and anti-inflammatories, can have a pretty serious effect on mood, and especially things like weight gain, and hormones and everything. So it's really a case of managing how you can. I mean, I know that when my CFS is well put down, the IBS is probably going to remain to some degree, and I know that I can't just eat and carry on as I did before I was as sick, and that's just a simple fact. And I have the fibre, I've got the mints. I used to use Pepto-Bismol, don't anymore. I used to find that it was a bit harsh on the body, so I would possibly advise against that. And that's how I coped, that's how I took control of it, and I can mostly enjoy those foods I used to eat. My advice would be to experiment, and don't be afraid. If you stay away from those trigger foods for the rest of your life, then you'll never know if you're improving. So every so often, try something that used to be a trigger food in a moderate amount, give something a go. And if you end up taking about 10 years of your own lifespan off in the toilet afterwards, then scratch that one off as a no. So that's my advice there. The chronic fatigue post, or rather the chronic illness post, will come later in the week, I hope, and I'll see you then.